In this episode, we're going to discuss how the primeval current is actually another name for the flowing current of fate. The blue dancer fairy, the spiritual energy cycle, the crucible current, the current of causality, the path, divinity, a golden thread, all these are other names for this single metaphysical phenomenon. This knowledge likely dates back to Rauh. By examining the knowledge that Rauh's cultural descendants inherited from them, we'll not only gain more insight into the nature of the primeval current of fate, we'll reconstruct Rauh's metaphysical understanding of the world. The dance taught to the blind swordsman by the blue dancer fairy, the Dancer of Ranah's fiery dance, and the lion dance of the horn scent are likely the same kind of dance, the movement of one's body when controlled by fate. This dance may have been inherited from Rauh. Twin somethings forming a spiral seems to be part of the nature of the primeval current, suggesting a dualistic nature to fate. This is a jam-packed video, but all the ideas stem from this one main idea, that the primeval current is fate. Azura Lusat and errant sorcerer Wilhelm all made contact with the primeval current, and Selen is obsessed with the primeval current. The eyes of Selen's glintstone crown are closed, Wilhelm wears a red blindfold, and Azura and Lusat's headpieces cover their eyes. In the third eye blindness video, I suggested that people in the lands between purposely blind themselves so that they can see with their third eye, because the third eye may be able to see into fate. This is what the primeval sorcerers appear to be doing. Azura and Lusat even have medallions hanging in the middle of their forehead, representing the third eye. The primeval glintstone sorcerers were originally astrologers. The astrologers were stargazers, and in those days, we are told, the stars of the night sky guided fate. Yet isn't it so curious that all these primeval sorcerers have blinded themselves? How are you supposed to read fate in the stars when you can't even see the sky? As I theorized in the Runes Are Stars video, the runes are the stars within us, best exemplified by our head being at the center of the cosmos in the preceptor's big hat. In the third eye blindness video, I suggested that our rune is the third eye, and it is the rune's central black hole which is the pupil that sees fate. I think the primeval sorcerers realized this, and this is why they blinded themselves. Casting off the need to use the stars of the night sky to divine fate, they instead learned to use the stars within themselves. Founding Reign of Stars says, "The glimpse of the primeval current that the astrologers saw became real, and the stars' amber rained down on this land." The astrologers saw a glimpse of the primeval current, and it became real. Before it became real, it was imaginary. The eye you use to picture something in your imagination is your mind's eye, aka the third eye. What Founding Reign of Stars is telling us is that this ancient astrologer caught a glimpse of the primeval current by looking within themselves, into their imagination, using their third eye. Fate is something that can be found within, using one's third eye. This is the first piece of evidence that I believe suggests that the primeval current is fate. As Stars of Ruin says, when Lusat glimpsed into the primeval current, he beheld the final moments of a great star cluster, and upon seeing it, he too was broken. Some theorists have made the argument that Lusat saw the death of a star as it fell into a black hole, and maybe that star is the greater will or something like that. But, going with this idea that the primeval current is fate, isn't it possible that what Lusat saw was actually his own future death? The death of his star, his rune, falling into a black hole. Perhaps he looked too far into his own fate, witnessed his own death, and this is what broke him. Another set of clues which hint at the primeval current being fate comes from errant sorcerer Wilhelm. Wilhelm was not a founding primeval glintstone sorcerer, but he was able to make contact with the primeval current. The polished circular stone embedded in his Herodes glintstone crown is black with ripples of white. It bears resemblance to the memory stone in coloring, and in shape and coloring to the Moon of Noxtella talisman, two items which increase memory slots. What this tells me is that this black stone may represent memory, and the way Wilhelm made contact with the primeval current may have been by looking inwards into his memory. This makes sense if the primeval current is fate, because fate is the totality of one's memories. There's historical precedence in myth for fate being symbolized as water. In some of the oldest myths about him, Odin acquired his vast wisdom by sacrificing one of his eyes to the Well of Fate, which lies beneath Yggdrasil. Basically, he plucked out an eye, tossed it into the Well of Fate, and then he could see into fate. A well is a deep hole used to access groundwater. The name Well of Fate suggests that the water in the well is fate. While I think that this IRL historical evidence is good support for the idea that water and fate are linked, it would be better to use historical evidence from within the game itself. This is where Rauh comes in. In the Rauh Night and Flame video, we discussed how Rauh were experts in working with spiritual energy as well as working with the flow of water. We also discussed how spirits are associated with water symbolism. Rauh may have been the first civilization to have conceptualized the spiritual energy cycle as being akin to a current of flowing water. In that video, we also discussed how the Rauh ruins and the rises have shared architectural motifs, suggesting that the astrologers were either contemporaries or direct descendants of Rauh's culture. Thus, the astrologers may have inherited the concept of the primeval current from Rauh. The original conception of the primeval current may have been the spiritual energy cycle, the journey of the immortal spirit through birth, life, death, and rebirth. The journey of the spirit from birth to death is the course of its entire lifetime, its fate. If the primeval current is the spiritual energy cycle, and the spiritual energy cycle is a spirit's fate, then the primeval current is fate. There's a decent possibility that the Blue Dancer Fairy is a legend from Rauh, and is another piece of evidence which helps us tie the primeval current to fate. Like I just mentioned, Rauh seems to have been adept at manipulating the flow of water. Many places where we find the Rauh ruins, we find water. We find literal aqueducts at the ruin-strewn precipice in High Road Cave. The ancient ruins are filled with flowing water. And these ruins built into the cliffs in Limgrave and Caelid may be preventing erosion from the sea. Then, in High Road Cave, amidst flowing water and aqueducts, we find a piece of Rauh-derived technology, a golem, holding the Blue Dancer Charm. The Blue Dancer Charm is an ancient heirloom. Its description calls the story of the fairy bestowing the sword to the blind swordsman a legend. This story is an ancient legend, one that I believe descends directly from Rauh. Tarnished archaeologists put forth a theory that there was a great cataclysm in the ancient past, where a meteor hit the lands between and caused the Rauh civilization to fall to ruin, partially buried beneath the earth. This could have been what trapped these ruins, this golem, and the Blue Dancer Charm in this cave deep underground. The Blue Dancer Charm says the following: "The dancer in blue represents a fairy, who in legend bestowed a flowing sword upon a blind swordsman. Other items referencing the blind swordsman tell us that the blue color of this fabric symbolizes brisk waters, as fluid and flowing as the sword in the hand of its wearer. Blue fabric symbolizes flowing waters. The Blue Dancer Charm is a doll made from blue fabric. Thus, we can say that the charm symbolizes flowing waters. But per its item text, the dancer in blue represents a fairy. So we're looking for something that 1 is a fairy and 2 has flowing waters. Shifra means fairy in Old Irish. Einsel is Scottish for mine own self, and there's a fairy tale with a fairy that calls herself Einsel. Thus, it seems to be that the blue fairy with flowing waters that we are looking for are the Shifra and Einsel rivers. These rivers are also twin rivers. More on that later. This is the conclusion that I made in one of my very old Reddit posts. The Blue Dancer Fairy is the Shifra River. I thought that was a pretty cool find back in the day. But the thing is, how does a river teach a blind man how to fight? With the revelation that the primeval current is fate, it got me thinking about the nature of this river. Perhaps, instead, the Blue Dancer Fairy is a more metaphysical river. Rauh may have conceptualized the spiritual energy cycle as a flowing river. In the original Japanese, the kanji for fairy is related to the kanji for spirit. So instead of the dancer in blue representing a fairy, it may be more appropriate to refer to it as a spirit, a spiritual river. But even more convincing is the etymology of fairy. Fairy comes from the French fée, which comes from the Latin fata, meaning the fates. Fata is the plural of fatum, aka fate. The Blue Dancer Fairy that bestowed the flowing sword upon the blind swordsman was fate. If you think this is a cool theory, you can show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. But what exactly is this flowing sword that fate bestowed upon the blind swordsman? As we discussed in the Third Eye Blindness video, many of the strongest fighters in the game purposely blind themselves. They seem to be doing so to force themselves to use their third eye to see, which confers some strategic advantage over normal eyesight. As Corrin's Prophet Blindfold says, why hesitate when the path leading to the future is clear? Just close your eyes and walk. The path to the future is fate, and this text is suggesting that when you close your eyes and follow fate, you don't even need to see to be able to walk. If you allow fate to guide you, you may not need to see to fight either. As people in the comments of that video pointed out, this theory explains why enemies can use input reading against you. In Star Wars, Obi-Wan gives Luke a helmet to blind him, and this is how he describes how to use the Force.
Remember, a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him.
You mean it controls your actions?
Partially, but it also obeys your commands.
The Force is something you can feel flowing through you. In Elden Ring's universe, what one feels flowing through them is the flowing current of fate. I believe that this is the flowing sword that was bestowed upon the blind swordsman. Of course, it's absolutely possible that the flowing sword was literally just a sword. We see such swords in the game. There's the flowing curved sword, the Nox flowing sword, the Shamshir. But to a blind person who wants to defeat a god, what is more important? What sword design and technique they should use? Or to teach them how to fight blind in the first place? In fact, the ability to move with the flow of fate seems to be referred to as a dance. If the dancer in blue represents fate, then the blue dancer charm is telling us that fate dances. The flowing curved sword's description mentions the dancer garbed in blue, with their blade patterned after flowing water, and its strong attack unleashes a series of strikes akin to a dance. Melania's teacher was a blind swordsman, and her famous attack is the waterfowl dance. The flow we have been speaking of is really a dance. Given the origin of the Blue Dancer Fairy legend, the importance of the dance seems to date back to Rauh. More evidence for the existence of a special dance dating back to Rauh comes from the Dancers of Ranah. The similarity of the names Rauh and Ranah is obvious. The Blue Dancer Fairy's dance is one of flowing water, but the dance of Ranah is fiery, one of burning passion. Water and fire usually don't mix, so how can we reconcile that both kinds of dance trace back to Rauh? Well, as we theorized in the Night and Flame video, Rauh may have been the origin of the alliance of Night and Flame. That is, an alliance between the astrologers and the fire giants. Thus, it is reasonable that dances of both water and flame could have originated with Rauh. There is a third form of dance which may date back to Rauh, the horn-sense lion dance. The divine beasts are called messengers of the heavens, which sounds similar to how oracles, prophets, and other diviners of fate are described. To invoke divinity means to call upon some form of spirit, deity, or other cosmic force to channel their power. When the divine beasts invoke divinity, they perform this crazed, cavorting dance, which is described as being full of divinity. The sculpted keepers are those who excel at divine invocation, and it is they who are granted the honor of performing the lion dance. The ritual tool used to perform such a dance is the divine beast head, which troubles focus. And by troubles, I mean drops to 0. It seems that the way to channel divinity is to completely lose focus and let divinity take over, allowing it to control the movements of your body. This is how the lion dance works. Allowing some other force to control your movements is similar to how we described how moving with the flowing of fate works, and how Obi-Wan described how to use the force to fight. If these phenomena are truly one and the same, it may be that another description for the flowing current of fate is divinity. Or at least, this is what the Hornsent would call it. The third eye can see into fate, and we see a twin spiral design painted on the divine beast head, flowing from the third eye. Another instance of twin spirals being connected to fate. We've already traced 2 forms of dance back to Rauh. The lion dance may be a third. Per the Antiquity Scholars Cookbook, the Hornsent academics were studying the Rauh ruins. It is possible that the lion dance is another element of lost knowledge that they learned. We even fight a dancing lion in the ancient ruins of Rauh. There is something else the Hornsent learned from Rauh that can help us understand the nature of the primeval current and how it relates to fate. The spiral incantation sigil bears resemblance to the between two trees symbol we find all over the ancient ruins of Rauh and at the ruin-strewn precipice. This same sigil is also on the Hornsent's spiral tree seal, suggesting that this design is depicting twin trees that are joining together to form a spiral. Since Rauh is older than Hornsent culture, we can say that the between two trees design is a precursor to this spiral tree design. It seems that the Hornsent may have learned about how to create a spiral from studying Rauh. The Spira incantation says, the spiral is a normalized crucible current. Obviously, crucible current has the same wording as primeval current. Given the origin of the sigil, we can guess that this information was learned from Rauh, like how the astrologers learned of the primeval current from Rauh. The crucible current and primeval current are like cousins, their common ancestor being the spiritual energy cycle that Rauh first conceptualized as a current. To use the Spira incantation, you twist your arms together to summon a vertical spiral of light. It seems as though a spiral is part of the science for how to create a current. This may be true of the primeval current as well. We purchased the Shard Spiral sorcery from Selen, which fires twin projectiles that form a spiral as they travel. This spell was the product of a failed attempt to create a new comet. The comet that Selen is trying to recreate is almost certainly Comet Azur, which fires a tremendous comet in a torrent. Like the word current, torrent is a word for flowing water, and Azur produced this spell after gazing into the primeval current. It seems like the general belief of both Selen and the Hornsent is that a spiral is a precursor to creating a current, and the spiral is produced by twin somethings coming together. Side note, Torrent is the primeval current confirmed. As desperately as I want to dive into the nature of these twin somethings and the creation of the spiral, we cannot at this moment. There's too much to be said. But I would love to know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Right now, the most important thing is to note that a twin spiral is part of the nature of the primeval current. For some fantastic lore on the twin spiral, be sure to check out Scummage Infa's video about the Divine Tower trees from Night Rain. It's linked in the description below. This crucible current is described as a current of light. How can we reconcile the primeval current, which is conceptualized as flowing water, with the idea of a current of light? Well, another usage of current is in the sense of an electrical current. In the Runes Are Stars video, I suggested that our consciousness is the pattern of electrical activity flowing through our neurons. In essence, we are a flow of electrical energy through time. The convergence of sensory stimuli into consciousness is captured in the symbolism of the rune. In the present moment, the rune symbolizes the process of consciousness, but as we pass from one moment to the next, the previous moment becomes memory, and thus the rune comes to represent memory. Plotting out every moment of someone's life from their birth to their death, using the rune to represent each time point, you get a plot representing the entirety of their memories. Fate is everything that happens to a person during their life, all their memories, and thus we can say that this plot represents fate. Each moment also represents consciousness, and thus you can say that this plot represents the flow of consciousness across a person's entire life, the flowing current of electrical energy from birth to death. It may seem like I'm pulling this plot out of nowhere in order to shoehorn some concepts together, but wait. I think that visualizing fate like this is justified, and to see why, we turn to Berserk, one of Miyazaki's biggest inspirations. In Berserk, the current of causality is described as being a river, and is closely related to the concept of fate. Some lovely Berserk theorist out there diagrammed the current of causality as this. Each event in time is a causality. Some of these events are cosmic, and we have no control over them. But some events, which lie in our own chain of causality, we can control. Note again the pattern of twin currents. In the Runes Are Stars video, we talked about how there's shared symbolism between causalities and runes, and we can think of the rune as a causality. This plot represents the chain of causality, and this plot represents the chain of consciousness, memory, and fate. In the metaphysics of Berserk, causality and fate are related but distinct, so I won't suggest that these plots are equivalent. But the concepts are discussed together enough that I would suggest that if it's appropriate to view causality as a current, this may also apply to fate, and thus I think we are justified to view fate as a plot like this. If you smooth the plot so that the steps flow together, the plot looks like a golden line. It's easier to view it as a continuous flowing current, which could represent electricity or consciousness this way, right? An important thing to note is that this golden line isn't solid gold. At the center of the runes is a black hole, which we can see in Golden Rune 1, around which the lowercase r runes amass, and which we see again in the Hero and Lord's runes. Thus, there's actually a central black line running through the middle of this golden current. Comet Azur fires a tremendous comet in a torrent. A torrent is a rushing flow of water, and I've always thought that the use of torrent here is a clue that this is what the primeval current actually looks like. Plus, Azur came up with this spell after staring into the primeval current. Imagine you took a cross-section of Comet Azur. You get something that looks like the Lord's rune, or a cross-section of a regular rune with its black hole center. I think that Comet Azur bears resemblance to the smooth fate plot, but with blue-green energy instead of gold. The fate plot is gold because the runes are gold, because they have lingering traces of gold. But Estelle's head with its Lord's rune looking ass is the color of Comet Azur. We're talking about a current of memory, and we see that the remembrances themselves can be many different colors. So maybe this current of memory can also be different colors. The visual imagery doesn't all line up perfectly, but that's because we're discussing something metaphysical. The glimpses the primeval sorcerers have gotten of the primeval current aren't real. They only exist within their imaginations. Golden threads and rivers and spirals are just simulacra, unsatisfactory imitations of a higher truth. In many IRL mythologies, fate is symbolized by a golden thread, which is manipulated and cut by the goddesses known as the Fates. I think that this plot also kind of looks like a golden thread, which makes sense because it describes fate. We've identified that the presence of twin currents, perhaps in the form of a spiral, is part of the nature of the flowing current of fate. Note that in every single needle item in the game, we see a twinned pair of threads. These twin threads twist around each other in a spiral. I doubt that this is a coincidence. If you consider a needle to be symbolic of the golden thread of fate, you can find more links connecting fate to the primeval current. One hint comes from the Dragon King's Cragblade, the item we get in exchange for Placidusax's remembrance. As I mentioned in the Third Eye Blindness video, Placidusax is a being beyond time and may be able to see all of fate. A major clue being that we must be in his arena to use Miquella's needle to cheat fate and avoid becoming the Lord of Frenzied Flame. The Cragblade weapon looks like a needle, and its weapon description describes it as a sword containing primeval lightning. Of the 34 times that the word primeval is used in the game's text, 33 are used in reference to the primeval current or primeval sorcerers, and 1 is used here, in the description of a weapon that looks like a needle. There's another clue suggesting a relationship between needles and currents. The Nox flowing sword has a blade forged from the metal of a silver tear that is as fine as a needle, and its skill flowing form temporarily transforms it into its liquid form. A needle that's transformed into a flowing liquid form suggests an interchangeable relationship between needles and something flowing. I think this is a subtle nod that the thing that threads and flowing currents represent are the same. Lastly, check out St. Trina's torch. It depicts a third eye, and St. Trina's hair appears to be flowing into or out of the eye itself. The curves and waves of the hair are flowing, almost river-like. I think that yet again this is another visual clue helping us to tie the primeval current to the third eye in Fate. There is one flowing design on each side of her head, perhaps another instance of the pattern of twin rivers. This game is just incepting our brains with these tiny little weird things which make you ask, why the F is that like that? What the F does that mean? Until eventually, finally, you find a story that explains why all the little weird things are there. In the game, path is another term that is used to reference fate. In the original Japanese, the kanji for path is Dao, meaning way, path, or road. You've heard of Dao before, referring to the Dao, the way from Daoism. The Dao can be roughly thought of as the flow of the universe, and is usually described in terms of elements of nature, and in particular as similar to water. This sounds like how we've conceptualized the primeval current of fate. While it's not explicitly stated as fate, the concept of the Dao is deeply intertwined with the idea that life events are largely predetermined, meaning individuals should strive to align themselves with this natural flow, rather than actively trying to control their destiny. The Dao can be thought of as another cognate to the metaphysical concepts which we have discussed in this video. The conception of the Dao as fate also includes twin somethings, the paired concepts of yin and yang, equal but opposites. This will be the key to how we put together the pieces of the twin somethings which form a spiral, which become the flowing current of fate. It's also how we're going to be able to connect fate back to the beginning of all things. But that is a topic for a future video. This thing, fate, is a golden thread, a river, the primeval current, the current of causality, the spiritual energy cycle, the blue dancer fairy, divinity, the lion dance, the path. It's the Tao, the way. It's the totality of your memory, of all memory. It's the flow of consciousness from birth to death, and the flow of energy in the universe since the beginning of time. It's all of these things, and it's none of these things. Because this thing that we're trying to describe with rivers and threads and words is something greater than that. A metaphysical truth that only exists as what it is. Which is why Lao Tzu said this: "There is something that contains everything. Before heaven and earth, it is. Not knowing its real name, we only call it the way. If it must be named, let its name be great. People follow earth, earth follows heaven, heaven follows the way follows what is." If you enjoyed this video and feel that it contributes positively to the Elden Ring community, please leave a like to help boost its visibility within YouTube's algorithm. If you enjoy my content in general, please subscribe. It is super motivating. My fellow Tarnished, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.